The first step is to undertake a home assessment, not only to identify the climate safe room in the home, but also much more. There are two distinct disciplines required to get a full picture of what's required to achieve a structured plan that makes the climate safe room as good as it can be with the available budget. Those disciplines are the thermal assessment, which focuses on the climate requirements and on the building itself. And the other is the electrical assessment, which focuses on the electrical infrastructure and the electrical upgrades. I'm joined here today by the leaders of the assessment team, of which I'm also a member. Liam, who heads up the thermal assessments, and Brendan, who does the electrical assessments. So welcome, Liam.
Hi, Morris.
Liam, what exactly is a standard thermal assessment of a home, and how does that differ from one specifically for a climate safe room?
So a standard thermal assessment, thermal of course for heat. So we're looking at how the house, the dwelling, deals with heat, which is in the first instance about its draft proofing and its insulation. So I'm looking at the whole house, how well sealed it is against air leakage and drafts, and where are the biggest holes, what are the fixes that we can provide that would effectively, durably solve those problems. So that's a whole house thermal assessment. For a climate safe room, we're trying to identify the one or two rooms in the house that the client would most like to use in the case of a heat wave. So we can look at the thermal performance or improve the thermal performance of just those one or two rooms rather than the whole house.
Right, so there's less to treat.
Less to treat, yes.
Yeah.
And from that, there's some issues can come up, such as gas heaters, where there's open fluid gas heaters in those smaller rooms.
Yeah.
Sealing up those smaller spaces creates a greater safety risk. So that's where smaller space doesn't necessarily mean straight away simpler and easier. It, is in some cases, but it does bring up other issues.
Yeah. So specifically, I don't suppose many people have got unfluid gas heaters anymore, hopefully, but there are quite a few open fluid gas heaters, aren't there?
Yep, there's definitely some open fluid gas heaters still around, and they have real safety issues for leakage of methane, carbon monoxide, sulfur dioxide. Yep.
And there have been some fatalities actually from these heaters.
Yes.
So it's important to, you can't just draft proof a room or rooms with one of those heaters still functioning, right?
Yes, correct. Yeah.
Right, so it's important that they get decommissioned if the climate safe room is going to be safe. Right?
Yes. Yep.
Now, you mentioned insulation as well. So how do you look at this, and what insulations do you look at?
Yeah, so the standards for insulation in Australian homes are well set out in the National Construction Code for new houses. Existing houses, of course, many were built with little to no insulation, or insulation was installed decades ago and has deteriorated and become ineffective. We look ideally, how do you put it, in person, get our eyes on it, actually climb up in the roof and have a look inside some sort of a wall penetration, have a look under the floor if we can, to see what insulation is actually there, how well installed it is, what condition it's in. Mm-hmm. And once you can do that, it's fairly straightforward to provide a rating to say, is it R2, is it R3, is it mouldy, those sorts of things. And then advise the householder, okay, this is how far below the current standard you are. We recommend you have it improved,
So typically it's ceiling insulation is...
That's the first
port of call.
Sure.
It's the easiest to get to usually, right?
Yes.
Yep. But it's also possible to, like if there's access under the floor, then that's not a bad way to go as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And, for some floors, under the floor is easier than any other part of the house. If you've got good clearance under the floor, it's quite easily done. There's excellent products out there for it. With roof insulation, older houses, there's a lot of skillion roofs, particularly in the inner suburbs of Melbourne. We do a fair bit of work. their access is difficult, and retrofitting insulation can be tricky, and we don't want to promise, gold standard outcomes for every household because it's just not possible.
Right. So if the climate safe room doesn't include a skillion roof, that would be
ideal, preferred,
right,
for sure.
Yep. Because it's quite difficult to deal with.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Difficult to get an even good coverage with it under a skillion roof.
Yeah. And how do you look in walls to figure out if there's any insulation in the walls?
Take advantage of any existing wall penetrations, such as wall vents or occasionally power points. But I also use a thermal camera quite routinely, which is useful to see where there's unevenness in the wall. That's generally a giveaway, or where there's been a renovation at some stage. If there was a renovation in 2005, there should be R1.5 in the wall, and so you can use the thermal camera to go, okay, is that renovation section better than this section over here?
Uh-huh.
Then that gives you a clue that, okay, they've got different levels of insulation in these different sections of the house.
Right. And is it possible to retrofit wall insulation?
Absolutely, yeah, with very good results.
Mm-hmm.
Using blown fill of carbon superfill is one product that's used for it.
Yep.
Making multiple penetrations on the outside of the wall in between the timber studs, the
Yep.
noggins, to fill up each section of the wall cavity.
Uh-huh. Okay. And that would make quite a good result, I imagine.
Yes. And I've actually used the same thermal camera to look at multiple jobs of that.
Uh-huh.
And you do occasionally get some holes and patches, some imperfect installations, but broadly speaking, yes, you can get excellent results with retrofitting wall insulation.
Okay. I imagine it must be quite difficult to get absolutely every nook and cranny done in that method.
Yeah. Impossible, really. In all houses, there's always difficulties.
Yeah, but still, would make a big difference.
It makes a very big difference. Yes,
Yeah.
can vouch for that in my own house. Actually,
Right. You've had it
enormous
yourself.
difference. Yes.
Awesome.